All right, crypto market updates. Looking at the Bitcoin charts, we can see that this bear pennant broke down a bit. So I think we just created a new low on the BTC charts. Obviously, correlation with altcoins. They don't get the blessing to moon until Bitcoin is ready, right? So like I mentioned yesterday, obviously other key levels that I'd be looking at are either the 3K level, possibly down to 2800 for a precise 85% drop off the top, or if that fails, then another key level that Chris is mentioning is the 2K area, which would mean Bitcoin would drop lower than it has on previous cycles, but may have also gone a little bit more parabolic too than some previous cycles. So that's certainly not out of the question. So not only is Bitcoin dumping, but equities, the stock market's kind of been dumping as well today. Like I mentioned before, I think December is definitely tax harvesting season. I know in the stock market and the crypto markets, probably most investors saw some losses on stuff. So this is like last minute for people to lock in losses and be able to offset other income tax, either from previous gains or from other income or so on and so forth. So looking at the DJI. So this is the Dow Jones. I think it was a few months ago. It was in October or whatever where I closed out. Yeah, it was October because weed was legalized in Canada and weed stocks started dumping on the news, and I closed everything out on my stock accounts except for platinum. I did hold some platinum, and I have a very small position in the HMNY because it was so degenerately low in the gutter that I figured, hey, something that dumped like 99.99%, might as well throw some pocket change at it. Platinum's been going down a bit too, though. I think gold was going up. So you look at this, it kind of basically looks like a head and shoulders on the Dow Jones. So we saw some selling off today, probably just more tax harvesting. It's possible maybe we bounce, create another shoulder, or maybe this can be considered another type of shoulder. It is lower high, so if we snap this line, then probably be a free fall into another recession or whatever, right? So those accounts are just sitting in cash. I'd rather, for those accounts anyways, I'd rather have like just sit in cash and not have them, like if the market doesn't go into a recession, then I can reevaluate my stance and maybe start buying some stuff up. But I'd rather just have that available just in case we do. Then this would be an area that I'd be looking at down here on stocks. And my goal for, like I mentioned several times, my goal moving forward into 2019 is leaning more towards value investing. So if we did have a crash in the stock market, I would like to scoop up cheap stocks that produce high dividends, right? Just another passive income stream, right? And if you look at the overall bigger picture too, this is we've looked at this before, at the divergence and the double top right now, and break of the ascending trend line and immediate trend line from here. If we go to Hikinashi, you can see it's kind of turned red. Lots of big volume, almost like distribution volume up. So it's possible that that doesn't happen. And if that doesn't happen, then what this would look like would be just kind of a correction like this, right? But in the grand scheme of things, every single stock market correction has just been an opportunity to buy on the cheap. And my hypothesis with the stock market, in my opinion, this is just my hypothesis, is that generally the people selling on distribution are, probably, big funds, financial institutions, billionaires, stuff like that. And then I think for the majority of retail, I think it's encouraged to have them bag hold, for the most part, because oftentimes retail's what gets hit the hardest. These mutual funds and all this kind of stuff that retail generally is in, they usually end up with, big drawdowns, and but then it usually recovers afterwards, right? So I think what ends up happening is the quote unquote smart money sells and then buys everything back for dirt cheap, and then the show continues, right? We don't know if this is going to happen. Maybe it goes up higher. Maybe this is just shoots up into another parabola. But we're at 7 to 10 years, right? We're at 10 years now, and we tend to see these market cycles every 7 to 10 years. And we know that debt's kind of been going out of control in the stock market. So wouldn't be surprised to see a contraction of credit with the rise of interest rates and all that stuff. We'll see how that impacts crypto. For the most part, over the years, crypto has been considered a non-correlated investment class, but that'll probably change as more financial institutions get involved in crypto. We'll probably see a lot more correlation. Generally, what tends to be the most bullish for Bitcoin and crypto is when currencies fail, when fiat currencies fail. So we've certainly seen some inverse correlation. We started seeing that in 2016 when the value of the yuan, the Chinese yuan, was getting devalued. We start to see Bitcoin going up as a result of that. There was or people trying to lock in value for their yuan and put it in something with Bitcoin in a place that has very, very tight capital controls. We've obviously seen the effects in places like Venezuela, where the currency is completely worthless and hyperinflated, where people walk around with barrels of money and it's worth nothing. Like, you can just pretty much burn the money and use it as fire fuel, which would have more value, right? So this is the result of hyperinflation. So we've seen crypto become very popular in Venezuela last year as a result of this. In places like Iran, we're starting to see their currencies being completely devalued as a result of sanctions and probably some hyperinflation there as well. We're seeing it grow in popularity, even Bitcoin mining, because the cost of electricity is low. So we do see a flight to Bitcoin as an inverse correlation when currencies fail. I'm skeptical as to whether or not we'd see a flight from the equities market, though, unless it came from institutions. The reason why I say that is because if retail investors lose like 50% of their stock portfolio, I doubt they're going to want to put money into like a highly speculative, risky investment that keeps getting fudded hard on Bloomberg, right? But apparently central banks have also been investing in equities. Central Bank of Japan, Switzerland. If that starts to mess up with their currencies, then we might start to see a flight to crypto. But what we do know, where a drop in equities might play out next year, like let's say because the stock market's still high in the sky, right? And I'm not necessarily saying a recession is guaranteed. Maybe crypto has made me very, very sensitive to anything that looks like a top, right? Because in crypto, when you see a chart like this, that just kind of shoots straight up and, creates a double top with some bearish divergence and high volume, it's usually a sign, as a crypto trader and or investor, it's usually a sign to get the hell out of Dodge and start going into fiat, start locking in gains or whatnot, right? So it's possible maybe I'm a little bit too hypersensitive. But the thing is that I might not also have the same biases, not being heavily invested in the stock market. The more heavily invested we are in any one particular thing, it helps to contribute to confirmation bias. So we'll see how this plays out. Nothing might happen. It's possible that we don't get a recession. And the thing is that I'm not actually gunning for that. As much as I'd like cheap deals on stocks, and as much as I like buying stuff that's low, I won't get any pleasure from people losing money, because then there's greater implications, there's job losses and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's possible nothing might happen, but if something does happen, I want to be prepared for it. I want to be ready to be able to buy some stuff on the cheap if that were to happen, right? Because the overall larger performance as it recovers. And even and I know some people personally that had massive drawdowns on their retirement in 2008, and then even the price that they had before the drop doubled in value. Their portfolio still doubled in value over 10 years, even though they had a 50% drop, right? So, not everyone has to be a trader or whatnot in the stocks, or has to liquidate everything, at the highs. You could still perform well over long term, just based on industry growth and those metrics. If we did have a recession, what would be interesting is that, for all of 2008, not 8, sorry, I just skipped back a decade. All of 2018, crypto's being in a bear trend. Crypto's being oversold. It's been dumping hard, right? In my opinion, even though we've seen some blood in the stock markets, it hasn't gone into recession mode, right? It's still very, if you zoom out on the larger time frames, it's still very close to the top. We've dropped 10% from the top. Big whoop. Obviously, other stocks have dropped more. Facebook and stuff had some pretty big drops and such. Some banks have had big drops, but 10% drop off the top is not a 50% drop like what we'd see in in the last recession type of thing. So what might be interesting in that process is that as we have these financial products specifically designed for insured and designed for either retail or financial institutions to be able to purchase stuff like Bitcoin, it is possible that if the stock market drops, they might be looking for opportunities in another market and therefore accumulate in another market before the other market starts a new cycle. So who knows? Maybe we'll start to see inverse correlation. This is all speculation. The reason why it's all speculation is because we're still on the cutting edge of a new industry. We're still very much on the new frontier, and this is the first. We're still in the process of price discovery and correlation, right? We don't know what the correlation will be, because Bitcoin and crypto has never been introduced to the wider global economy on a mass scale, because there hasn't been the proper investment vehicles for that to happen, because it's mostly just been retail. There has been financial institutions involved, the ones who are willing to take bigger risks and hire the technical experts to secure their private keys and such. But for the most part, it's not like it's been a backbone or a staple in the overall industry, right? Once you have it in more funds and retirement accounts and all that stuff, then suddenly you start to see how it correlates with other investments, because it hits a wider, broader spectrum and bigger market, much bigger market, right? But in this bear trend, the industry is also getting purged, right? There's a lot of cleansing that's happening in the industry, a lot of tightening up of the bootstraps. 2018. So let's just move away from stocks and just go back into crypto. In 2018, in this bull run, ICOs were such a massive part of the bull run, especially for stuff like Ethereum. We just had this massive influx of new users, and out of those new users, there were many of them who were looking for basically cheap money, cheap free money and a free lunch, right? Just raising millions and millions of dollars on vaporware. Some projects were good, right? And will probably do well that did ICOs. But we do know that a lot of them kind of just ended up duds. Some of them their tokens never even hit exchanges, or some of them ended up complete frauds and scams entirely. And, you know, in 2014, 15, 16, and even the beginning of 2017, because I was still carrying a lot of that older crypto energy, there's always been a lot of scams and stuff in crypto for the most part. But, you know, I used to view ICOs as decentralized crowdfunding for research and development on free open source software with a fun speculative element to it. As in, you know, here's a token. It's like a speculative t-shirt. Fund our project so we can experiment, tinker around for open source technology. We don't really have a business model, but we're just going to, you know, give away all this code for free, and then you can build on it and do with it what you will, right? Like Ethereum and such. So it's kind of a part of a way to fund research and development for open source technology. And that's how I initially viewed ICOs. And it was a free market back in the day. And you could basically launch ICOs with very little regulatory oversight and raise modest amounts of money. You know, Ethereum would raise, I think, 16 million or something. It wasn't the crazy money we're seeing last year. But then it got really out of hand and degenerate, right? Obviously, there's a double-edged sword with a free market. And the double-edged sword is you basically get a lot of scammers and a lot of noobs who know nothing about crypto who just want the free lunch and basically just sell a bunch of crypto trinkets, a bunch of tokens that have no real equity, don't give you voting rights, and no profit model except for just dumping it on the markets, right? Just a purely speculative element. So we're kind of seeing a lot of that getting cleaned up. And I think moving forward into the next crypto boom, the next bull market, there's probably going to, what we saw in the ICO craze, we'll likely see in the STO craze, which will be likely private equity deals or maybe even public offerings as well. But the difference in that is instead of just getting, even equity and stocks are speculative, obviously, and even in stocks you have a lot of garbage and a lot of scams. So that's not just new to crypto. That's just finance in general, right? I mean, the entire global economy is just rife with scams in general, right? So that's not unique to crypto. It's just the same old shit in a new package, right? So a lot of that's getting cleaned up, but there's going to be probably some really, really solid projects. And the difference is if one buys, you know, a private equity deal and gets real shares in something, the difference is you'll get voter rights and you'll actually own something. You know, perhaps the business will actually have a business model to try to generate profit. Whereas like most ICOs didn't even have that, right? Aside from speculative stuff, right? So anyways, so that's one interesting thing that I'm looking forward to in the next bull run, in the next wave. That said, there's always going to be a place for decentralized open source technology that's not just equity and all that stuff. And I personally think that the best way to go around creating disruptive crypto is to do what Satoshi did. Make it anonymous, make it open source, and do it for free. There you go. You wanna be free from all that noise. You want to create value for crypto. That's the way to do it. Simple. You know, don't start and you know, and if you want to do the company route If one wants to do the company round, actually start a company, then have a business model and offer real equity, and don't try to get a free lunch and just sell a bunch of worthless tokens. Right. So anyways, this is where I'm seeing the industry moving towards, and how it's changing and evolving. Right. So everything's changing and evolving. Now, on another note, I'm just mostly kind of talking about fundamentals right now, because as far as technicals, for me, it's all just kind of a waiting game, right? You know, I think we're getting closer to the bottom. I think we've had basically an entire month of capitulation, and when it does reach a bottom, we'll have a nice bounce play. And that's it. So right now it's kind of like a slow sell-off. So I'm just playing the waiting game on that. And if we go into lower areas, and we've talked about, divergence, and we've talked about the stochastic RSI, and we've, talked about different levels and other price areas where I'd like to do another batch of buying on some stuff. Ironically, though, one of the projects I haven't bought yet that I've been eyeing for lower prices, for some reason decided it wanted to go up today. Instead of giving, I've been gunning for like maybe trying to get this at $5. And it's like, for maybe there's a fundamental reason, or maybe for no apparent reason, because this is the one coin you want to try to buy lower, we're just going to go up 20% today. Thank you, markets. Right? It's I call that the irony of the markets. Maybe it's like some kind of quantum experiment, right? If you, what would they say, a boiled kettle doesn't, a kettle you stare at doesn't boil, or something like that, an observed kettle. Anyways, so yeah, just diving more into, fundamentals on the overall industry as a whole, because in my opinion, when prices are low and everyone's pessimistic and stuff, you have to zoom out. Yeah, watch kettle does not boil. Thanks. You have to, I kind of butchered that quote, didn't I? What was I going to say? When the prices are low and in the gutter and just bleeding out, market sentiment is low and negative and pessimistic. I find in crypto, you really have to zoom out at the bigger picture and really just focus on the good elements, and a watch chart does not capitulate. Yeah, that's a good twist on that. Love it. Or like a watch chart doesn't bounce too. There's another good one. Just keeps capitulating, and you want it to bounce, like sell your bags and go on vacation. Someone needs to be a sacrifice here. Sell your bags, use that for vacation money, go on a vacation, and then the markets will bounce really, really hard the instant you do that. So that's the irony with Bitcoin. Bitcoin loves doing that. It's a special flavor. Okay. So I find it's important to just look at the bigger picture, right? Focus on the bigger picture. Don't let the negativity and pessimism get you down. Focus on the positive things, and then focus on getting some cheap deals, right? And just the greater market cycle. So this is where my mind is at right now. And what's ironic and what's interesting in all of this is, I don't know if anybody's noticed how some media outlets have really gone absolutely nuts on a big FUD fest. Like, they're just drunk on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, just pumping out FUD articles multiple times a day. Bloomberg in particular. Has anybody noticed that? I might actually write an article on it, because it's kind of getting comical right now. As in, like, some of the things that they're trying to FUD are just a real stretch. Like, they're not even like new news pieces on bad stuff happening. Some of them are, but some of them are just like, okay, how can we create a scary story about something that sheds a negative light on crypto, and twist facts and reality to make it the industry seem worse than what it is. And then there's this one article from years ago that I retweeted about how apparently Bloomberg authors, reporters or whatnot, journalists are paid more if they can move the markets with their FUD, right? So then you look at stuff like that, and then you see that, news outlets that are actually owned by, there's big financial institutions that are actually part owners in those news. So then it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, who's doing all the manipulation here, right? So, some of the articles, one was, okay, so there was, how there's all those ransomware scams that going around in Bitcoin. Well, now apparently there is a bomb scam that went around, circulated in people's emails, and these scammers are just out of control. I mean, they're literally trying to ruin the industry, right? But it's like fake bomb scare. It's like, oh, there's a bomb in your building if you don't send Bitcoin. We're detonating it. Blah blah blah. So like even the FBI and stuff was looking. So this broke out lately, but Bloomberg's like, oh, the markets are dumping because of this bomb scare. And then today they came out with an article. Here's how you launder money. Right? Here's how you launder money with Bitcoin. Take your dirty cash and put it in a Bitcoin ATM machine, and then all of a sudden your money's clean. It's like, what? How does that work exactly? Like, because you take dirty criminal money and put it in a Bitcoin ATM machine, suddenly like your money's magically clean? Well, what are you supposed to do with that Bitcoin? If you want to put it in the bank, you have to show some sources of revenue and where it came from, right? You need to kind of prove where it came from to put in your bank, and then banks have been kind of stringent. So like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Whereas, people have been using like offshore banking and, shell companies and all that stuff for laundering billions of dollars. And even Deutsche Bank just got their offices raided for money laundering to the tune of like hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So there's like real paths and channels, and like serious criminals are not going to go to some ATM where you have to have your picture scanned with all these cameras everywhere, and then, be able to put in like $500 at a time and pay a premium of 10 to 15% over the spot markets to do what? To get Bitcoin. And then what? You have to put in your bank and still prove where the income. So like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So these are just, in my opinion, far-reaching articles, and the amount of money that's actually laundered in Bitcoin is so minuscule compared to, fiat, compared to the USD, compared to the actual legacy banking system that exists today, right? Anyway, so you're just seeing like a lot of these articles. I've been kind of tweeting and just commenting on it. Like one of the tweets I put. Actually, I'll show you. So here's just one thing I pointed out. So I just looked up, Bitcoin Bloomberg, and this is what popped up in my searches, right? Same image of a broken Bitcoin, eliciting very strong market sentiment and emotions. And then crypto crash accelerates, sending Bitcoin to another low, or Bitcoin slides, making monthly loss the biggest in 7 years, or, crypto businesses are going bankrupt, or this is all a part of the bull bear cycle. This is also part of market sentiment. It's going to make a very good collage one day. Bear, I'm going to call it bear euphoria collage. I've been doing a lot of screenshotting and just kind of making notes of market sentiment and FUD articles and all this kind of stuff. Just the same as like all the hype articles that we saw in the highs and all the bullish, hype-ish sentiment. Now you have the complete opposite in market sentiment. And obviously, like, it can sell off and last a lot longer than anticipated, just like the parabola, right? Just like multiple weeks of up and up and up and up and up. And it just seems like, man, is the selling ever gonna stop? Not the selling, is the buying ever gonna stop? It's just like the entire market's drunk on selling. 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. One over a month of just over exuberant buying, just completely degenerately drunk on buying crypto, right? And now we have the mirror opposite. We just have continuous FUD and selling, 5 weeks, a little pause in between, just constant selling and capitulation, right? Businesses going bankrupt, everyone screaming and crying on crypto Twitter about how everything's a scam. The media is just like on a 24/7 FUD factory machine. And these are just the extremes. And the reality is that both of these perspectives, the extreme high and the extreme low, both of them are out of balance, right? So anytime the industry or the market is out of balance, it just means that there is an excessive focusing or obsession with one particular element of the industry, right? When we're in the highs, is like crypto can do no harm, can do no wrong. Crypto will save the world, feed the children. It's new paradigm. It's changing the whole world. All this kind of crap when everything was completely overvalued. And everyone just pretty much buying dog shit that was completely overvalued and ICOs and all that stuff. Now, this is the hangover. So this is the party. This is like you just went on a 3-day bender. You've been partying at a rave for 3 days, right? And now this is like the crash. This is the hangover where you're lying in bed in pain for a week, right? As a result of this 3-day festival, this real bender. And now this is like counterforce, and the entire universe and natural law operates like this, right? You see equilibrium, everything's seeking equilibrium. And anytime you have extreme polar opposites, things have to come back to equilibrium. We see it in a pendulum swing. We see it, the way a clock swings, from side to side. We see it in nature. We see it in the weather, all this stuff, right? After party thoughts, I'll never do it again. Yeah. And then guaranteed then we go back into equilibrium, and it goes into slow growth period again, more sustainable growth, right? Then it's like, it has to establish a bottom range, whether it's a fast recovery or whether it's a slower accumulation. And then you have, a year, 2016, just a year of slow growth, right? Just some nice, large ascending triangles that would last 6 months a pop. And then it keeps breaking new highs faster and faster. Then you break out of the all-time high, and it just goes on an epic tear, keeps hitting resistance with corrections. But we showed what was interesting, and this is one thing we pointed out at the highs, and Chris pointed this out as well, was that it kind of accelerates, right? So the correction period and the acceleration period and the angles of the trend get faster and faster. So it's like, 11 months of bottom, then 6 months of pop of ascending triangles, and then all of a sudden, just a few months to get up here, and then you go from, a few months on corrections and accelerations to break all-time highs into a matter of weeks, and then like one single week takes out, an entire 2 weeks of gains, and just everything just speeds up and accelerates, right? And now we're experiencing that on the flip side, on the bleeding edge of this capitulation. I mean, this definitely is capitulation, and it's consistent selling until it finds a support, and then we're going to get an epic bounce, and then probably have to maybe establish some accumulation or some lower highs, and then higher highs and higher lows, and then perhaps slow growth period again. What likely won't happen is just, shoot straight up to a double top or break out all-time high, right? It's probably going to take some time for the industry to recover. But the thing that I absolutely love the most about this period in time, even more than the whole parabolic and stuff, is that it actually, it makes being a value investor and going hunting to build up like a good long-term investment portfolio, it makes that a lot better, obviously, than buying anything that's just continuously going up, right? And so, like I mentioned many times, having everything parabolic, wanting to be a crypto investor, wanting to actually own crypto, and, aside from longer term stuff, like some longer term Bitcoin, I'm never selling until, maybe much higher levels. It makes it very, very difficult, right? And so if the price is lower again, suddenly it's like, okay, now one could start the conversion process of fiat into crypto, without necessarily having to know where the exact bottom is or anything like that. And yes, obviously, when knife catching, there can be drawdowns, and the dumping can last a lot longer than anticipated. We pointed out how bounce plays have kind of changed a bit this year in the latter half of 2018, whereas you used to get some that would last literally like a day or whatnot. You get 3 days of blood and some nice bounces. Now you can basically just have multiple weeks of sell-off. So it's a little bit, you have to be a little bit more patient, like with everything in crypto right now. But there's one thing we do know, is that shit doesn't just, at least not in Bitcoin anyways, doesn't just go down in a straight line and just dies, unless it's some delisted shit coin that gets delisted from exchanges and is like a worthless token, like a Bullberry or something like that, then yes, you'll see a market do a mass sell-off and just die and go flat, and that's the end of it. Game over. Almost like a company going bankrupt, right? But, with Bitcoin being the most liquid crypto, 24/7 market, basically the coin and market of choice for the mainstream right now, both the regulators and financial institutions. It's like the safest coin right now with the most regulatory certainty, because it's got the most established security as well as the longest market, 10-year market. But we know that everything's correlated to Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin has its bounce, it's not going to be rocket science that we'll see some explosive green on a lot of other things. But also, I've been focusing on investing in protocols rather than just DApp tokens. That's been a part of my strategy, investing in protocols instead of DApp tokens. Moving into 2019 and perhaps 2020, once I've completely invested my trading accounts into crypto coins, into coins that I like, I want to move into private equity, crypto startups, and just focus on like positive industry growth for real businesses with real business models, and maybe even have a focus on helping out startups and stuff that are non-ICO. I'm not interested in I'm not interested in ICOs at all. My perception on that has changed. Like I said, I used to perceive them as research and development crowdfunding, and now, like after 2017, it just kind of put a sour taste on the whole ICO industry. So right now it's just like provide real equity or forget about it, right? No more, I don't think there's any more free lunches left. And obviously the regulatory risks around ICOs are, the government's clamping down on that stuff. So before it was a regulatory gray zone, it no longer is. So one can't just ICO willy-nilly for cheap free money like they used to, right, in crypto. So those are the changes and the shifts that we've been seeing. And then obviously a lot of people are all disillusioned by I think it gets a little too excessive right now, like it's extreme out of balance. So anytime the markets, just to finish off, anytime the markets are extreme out of balance, it's important to in my opinion, to be a contrarian. One needs to shift their mindset to the opposite of what the market is doing. So when the market's all apple pie in the sky and a new paradigm going to take over the world and feed the children and, save everything, that's the time to be real cynical, really skeptical. I was feeling very almost like bitter about crypto because I just felt like it was just drunk on greed and bullshit, overvalued stuff, dog crap, right? So I was very cynical, and it's challenging. It can be challenging to take an opposite view of the entire meta trend and the entire markets, right? So it was challenging, right? I had to take a break around Christmas time from it all just to kind of pull out from the markets and just kind of sit in cash and just wait, right? And now it's like the opposite. Everyone's now cynical and angry and hating crypto and all this stuff. And so I want to focus my mind on the positive elements of crypto, the growth of crypto, going back to the roots of crypto. Why the hell have we started doing this whole thing to begin with, right? It's about freedom, sovereignty, and other alternatives, other alternative financial models, economic experimentation, free market, all that great stuff, technology being able to change the world to, provide more freedom and access to money, just like the internet did with information. This is, the internet of money. So to focus on those positive things and on real industry growth around real companies and trying to provide interesting products and services to the industry as a whole that it needs. Because there's an absolute ton of opportunity still in crypto because everything hasn't been solved, right? Just like the early internet. Everything hasn't been solved. And just like you had the internet boom in the late 90s, and then you had the big crash, the real giants, the real tech giants, the Google, the Facebook, the Amazon, only came after the crash, right? Then suddenly they replaced the other biggest companies in the world, which are oil companies. Those are no longer the biggest companies. And then it shifted into big tech companies, right? So the industry is still very, very new and ripe with opportunities in this industry, both investment opportunities, trading opportunities, as well as entrepreneurial opportunities, right? So that's kind of the stuff I want to focus on, the higher level stuff when everyone's in the gutter and being really cynical and such. So it's not always the easiest path, right? It's not always the easiest path being a contrarian, and you have to have a very strong mind and determination to think the opposite of what the entire herd is thinking, right? Because as humans, we tend to want to gravitate towards what's popular or what the entire herd is doing, right? So being a contrarian and bucking against that, or at least criticizing it or whatnot, tends to be a very solo path, right? It's a individualistic path that means that one has to actually think for themselves, come to their own conclusions based on what they observe, without necessarily just blindly believing what the overall herd is being fed, right? Because I'll tell you, the overall herd in society thought Bitcoin was absolute. You think they're negative now. They thought Bitcoin and crypto was absolute dog shit in 2015, and look where that got them. A lot who thought it was dog shit in 2015 were buying in 2017, at the highs, right? So this is what the overall mainstream society will have one believe, and the media feeds into that because the media just sells what's popular, right? And the thing is, the media right now, not only are they getting attention from no coiners who want to feel vindicated for having missed out on plus 1,000,000% gains on Bitcoin and perhaps other cryptocurrencies, but definitely in Bitcoin, over 1,000,000% gains, feeling vindicated and feeling good about that, about missing out. Now's the time where they all come out of the woodwork to gloat. Ha ha, we told you. And they take pleasure in trying to see the, losses or whatever in the entire crypto industry. They get some kind of pleasure off of that because they were jealous that other people made it and did well with it. Instead of trying to learn and just try to look for opportunities and counter trade that, because that's not popular, right? Obviously, that's why they the difference between smart money and so on and so forth, right? So the media will feed into that. The media will deliver that because that's very popular. It's this self-reinforcement cycle, right? It just negative reinforcement cycle where the media spoon feeds this stuff to those people, and then they have more fodder to throw back. But also the crypto community is not really the good poster child for positivity either, because right now it's just basically a bunch of people throwing cow shit at each other, right? People are just throwing dung at each other. They're having a fecal fight on Twitter, and everyone's fighting with each other and being negative and pessimistic about everything. They're attacking exchanges, they're attacking startups, they're attacking marketers, they're attacking everything. Everything's crap, blah, blah, blah. Coins, projects, very, very pessimistic. So that just kind of feeds into it. And then the interesting thing is that even if we disagree with those negative news articles, even if we disagree with them, we'll still react to them. Even myself, right? I'll retweet articles that are negative to criticize them. But what am I doing? I'm promoting those articles. I'm driving more traffic for more people to read it. So this is why it's called clickbait. It doesn't matter what kind of attention these articles get, whether you're for or against it, whether it's positive or negative. Sometimes the real negative articles that draw a lot of criticism from particular people or industries can help propagate more traffic. At the end of the day, they're just selling ads, right? That's their business model. You go on their site, you look at an ad, it counts as an impression, and then Google pays the money, and there you go. It doesn't matter what they say as long as it drives clicks and gets traffic, right? So ultimately, I mean, our most potent weapon is complete boycotting and indifference of propaganda entirely, and not even paying our attention, because our attention is another form of currency. Our mental energy and our attention is another form of currency. And so when we pay attention even to things we disagree with, they're getting paid for that. They're making money off that, right? And we know the media loves negativity and stuff. So anyways, just kind of focusing more on a 360 bird's eye view of the entire industry and the extremes right now. So I'm staying my course on everything, and I'm just focusing on the positives, and I'm focusing on investing on more crypto as it becomes cheaper and cheaper until we move into the next cycle, because it's still a new and fresh industry that, in my opinion, hasn't reached market saturation. And this is not anything new. One also had to have that kind of level of conviction in 2015, right? The industry didn't just get where it is magically. It's not like all of a sudden, how the industry got to where it is today? We created it. Who is the foot soldiers to make that? Who is promoting crypto when nobody was into it, right? People on social media, people with blog posts, people on YouTube, in 2015, 2014, forget about even OGs who've been in it longer than I have. People in 2011, 2010, 2012, building businesses, marketing, promoting, all that stuff. It's all a part of the industry growth. It didn't just get here. Working with the regulators, all of that stuff, right? It's not just this is like decentralized money, right? So everyone who invests in it or uses it is actually a participant in the industry. It's not always necessarily just a passive process. The industry grows because individuals who are participants in it, who can participate without anyone's permission, make the industry grow. We are the industry, right? So when things are low and things are cheap, I invest, I buy, I become enthusiastic about crypto, and then I, continue being a foot soldier for crypto and helping grow the industry in the ways that I can. And I feel like now is the time to actually be very positive about it and not let all the pessimism, get us down and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the way I'm ruling with all of this. And that's the way it's been since I got into it, and I've watched it kind of go from nothing into what it is now. And I don't think it's over yet, right? There's still a lot more growth that needs to happen. And the industry being cleaned up and such, that's a good thing, as long as it doesn't get excessive. As long as the regulators don't use too wide a brush or just kind of make it completely illegal or anything like that. We need balance and moderation, right? And so cleaning up some of the scammier stuff. I've noticed that a lot of the stuff that was cleaned up, a lot of the ICOs they went after were actually outright scams. They were just full out scams, like promising things that just weren't true. Like there's like, here's a real estate fund that you can invest in ICO, and there's no actual real estate, or, so obviously like that stuff has to be cleaned up, and we already have laws against that kind of fraud and stuff. So a lot of that crap is being cleaned up. The barrier to entry is getting raised a little bit higher, for startups or raising funds and equity. And that's just that. That's just the industry maturing, really. And it's kind of what's interesting about it is you can watch a new industry emerge. I mean, how many times in our lifetime do we get to watch that stuff? I mean, nowadays more so than other times, because technology is evolving so fast. There's so many different elements in tech and science that are new industries emerging. Even stuff like, renewable energy or Tesla or stuff like that. New industries emerging. Space is another thing. And anyways, so that's that. And also we seep what we row. We sow. We reap what we sow. My bad. Completely butchered that one again. Man, I need to have another coffee this morning. Huh? We reap what we sow. So if we continuously feed into negativity and think negatively, we're going to continue this negative feedback cycle, right? Making it, whether it be in startups or just in anything, attracting money, one has to have a positive mental attitude in order to be able to do that, right? And so the industry as a whole doesn't necessarily need to, continue on its downward spiral. There needs to be some kind of counterforce and counterbalance to it all, right? And that all comes with attitude and action. So anyways, that's my 360 view on the market, my 1 hour rant on the crypto industry and where I think it's going and the changes that are currently happening to it on a fundamental note. And as far as price action goes, let's just see where it finds the bottom and wait for counterforce and a bounce, right? And I'm looking forward to that element. Like I said, it might not necessarily happen in December because of the whole tax harvesting. Also, word on the street, one last thing, word on the street, I didn't verify or confirm this, but apparently there's been some relatively large buy walls on multiple exchanges. I didn't confirm this at the 3K level. Now, sometimes that could just be spoofing, which can sometimes lead to more dumping, or it could actually be some participants keeping the market up above a certain level. Also, something else that was pointed out on Twitter was the top 200 wallet addresses. Some of them have had thousands and thousands of Bitcoins sent to them in batches of 200 to 300 or whatnot. So some people have been watching those wallet addresses increasing. So one needs to exclude any of the exchange ones, of course. No point in looking at exchange wallets. I mean, one can for sure, and if that increases, that might mean more accumulation or more selling. But it's when you see money moving off the exchanges in large batches of thousands of Bitcoin moving off the exchanges onto cold storage wallets that you know that there are other, large market participants that are doing accumulation. Because one thing that we always forget in the markets, we get so fixated on the red and the selling, but we forget for every seller there's a buyer. The same goes for every buyer. When everything's super green, right? Oh, it's super green. Look how bullish it is. It's so bullish, right? But for all these all these buyers that are bullish, there are sellers. This is why you end up seeing the bearish divergence. Sellers starting to take control even though the price goes up. The same happens on capitulation on the flip side. You got all these people who are losing money selling, but guess what? Those coins and that money are changing hands. It's going into someone's pocket. Someone else is accumulating on the capitulation, and oftentimes the ones who are accumulating are whales that are accumulating, and they're whales for a reason. Some of them are whales because they know how to play the markets really, really. They're whales because they're either new participants, big money trying to get into the markets who missed out on all this, or it's old money who actually knows how to do really well in crypto trading or investing that are now rebuying in after having distributed and sold at the highs, right? So it's just kind of, money's just changing hands right now. Coins are just being distributed and changing hands. There are buyers for those sellers. So it just so happens that sellers are in control right now, just like buyers were in control, right? But like all things, after winter comes spring and summer, after day comes night, night comes day, so on and so forth. It's just a cycle of life, cycle of the markets. That's just it. Oftentimes, the magic ingredient for trading or investing is patience. Trying to be on the right side of the market, of course, and then being patient, because things don't necessarily just happen instantly. So we'll end it at that, folks. Take care. Happy Friday. See what the weekend brings us. Is it going to be a bloody weekend? Are we going to get even lower prices, more degenerate prices on stuff? Or are things going to hold up on that 3K line of support? And what's it going to be? What's it going to be, folks? Let's see. Certainly exciting times regardless. That's it, folks. Take care. Cheers.